everybody. Happy Saturday to you. I hope you're having a great Saturday and an amazing weekend so far. My name is Terrell, and I want to welcome you to another great episode of The Color of Motion. I like to say, hey, stories come in all shades, and I highlight people of color and diverse backgrounds in the industry of motion graphics, animation, visual effects, cartoons, comics, and all that kind of good stuff that you know I love and we all love so much. You know the drill. I always say, hop into the comments, say, hey, where you tuning in from. I always want this to be an interactive experience for you all. And definitely love hearing from you. While I make sure that we are playing like we should be on all these channels here. Let me make sure. All right. Looks like we are on point on LinkedIn. Let me turn off the volume. All right. We're going on LinkedIn, looks like. Let's make sure that we are rocking and rolling. And it looks like we are rocking and rolling on Facebook as well. And make sure we are going on YouTube. And it looks like we are. And Instagram. That's always a funny one because Instagram is the only one that I have to go to the Instagram page to go live. It doesn't automatically go live on Instagram. So usually Instagram misses the first intro bit because it takes me a second to turn it on live on Instagram. But I cannot thank you so much for joining me on all these channels. Again, jump into the comments, say, hey, where you tuning in from. You know how I like to do it. Let's see if we can hop over here. All right. Yep. You know how you can find us each and every Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, live on LinkedIn. Of course, you can find us on LinkedIn. Also, make sure that you get plugged into the Facebook group community. That's where a lot of people are. And we're definitely trying to grow the group for sure. As always, you can find us on, now you can find us on Instagram, Color of Motion for sure. And we are doing a fun little giveaway for the remainder of the season. The first comment that comes through on the Instagram Live, that comes through the show, will receive an Amazon gift card. So you can win you an Amazon gift card if you're just checking us out on Instagram and make a comment. Say, hey, where you tuning in from and all that kind of good stuff. Make sure you join us. Also, check us out on the YouTube channel. Here we go. All right. The YouTube channel. So it's coming up a little slow. Like, share, and subscribe. Don Terrell. Definitely hit the bell notification so that you're notified when new content goes up on the channel, when the show goes live, and all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. I think I'm going to have to make this one static too because the animation is definitely playing slow, as you can see. Let's see if it goes now. All right. And it's stuck. All right. I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to do it this way. All right. Make sure you join us. Man. All right. This has been challenging. As you all know, this has been a very, very challenging let me hide that. Very, very challenging for third quarter. Yeah, start to the third quarter. I'm super excited about today's episode because this is kind of a makeup episode. I appreciate my guest so much for, rescheduling. He was initially scheduled to kick us off on this third quarter. But as you know, we had a little technical difficulty, so, we had to reschedule. in today's makeup episode. So I'm super looking forward to finally getting a chance sit down and have a fun conversation with my next guest for sure. As you know, and as I've been saying, I think the big issue that I've been having is with my processor and machine. So I'm at a point now where I'm going to have to get another machine to kind of level up here in the next thing. So the remainder of kind of this quarter, I'm going to try to take it easy with a lot of the motion that I've been doing through the show because that seems to be really pushing my system for sure. Like I said, we are here every Saturday afternoon, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, live on all the channels. Just make sure that you get plugged into the community and be a part of the community. I always want this show to be not only valuable to my viewers and fans and other creatives, but also entertaining as well. And I think it has been so far. Definitely support the show. Support the channel is much appreciated. I always love a great cup of coffee. Let me see if I can get this up. Buy me a coffee. There you go. Buy me a coffee. I love a great cup of coffee. Here you can support me until I get the Patreon page really fleshed out and up and running. Here you can support the channel. Anything that you can do helps me to continue to bring great content to you and bring great guests to you as well. With that, I'm not going to try and stretch this out. We are going to get this show on the road. Again, I'm super excited about my next guest. I think we can kind of get this train on the track. What do you say? Whoa, we are back. We are back, and we are back. Ready to get this kicked off. Everybody, my next guest, he writes comic books and graphic novels, including the award-winning series Bitter Root, along with his recent self-published project, including the Monster of Blackenstyne. Not to be confused with Blackenstein. We're going to ask him about that. Everybody, please help me welcome my next guest and friend, Mr. David Walker. David, David is finally back. David, I appreciate you so much for coming back on. You know how it went the last time. We had a bit of a time, but I think we can make it through this.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me back. These look, in this day and age, you can have technical issues that you didn't even know existed because technology is changing at such a rapid pace. So you just got to be patient and hope that things get resolved.
Oh man, and like I was telling you before the show, and to everybody out there, when you get your machine, get as much RAM as you can afford, because this machine I got only has 8 gigs, and that's not gonna cut it. at all doing live streaming. So I was able to get away with it this long, but now I'm going to have to level up the show. So David, like I said, I'm super excited to sit down and talk with you just about what you're doing. I came across you on LinkedIn when I saw your Blackenstein post, and I was like, wow, that's a really interesting comic. So definitely got to have you on. Talk about what's going on in the comics industry, what you see, where you kind of see the comics industry going, and the things that you're doing as far as self-publishing. I always like to start. What was that thing that got you, that kind of initially drew you into comics? I mean, we're all young. I guess most people, kids start, young, getting into comics. But was there a specific comic that you were just a fan of that really, drew you in?
Well, when I was a kid, when I was growing up in the 1970s, there was three shows that were on in syndication. There was Star Trek, there was the 1966 animated Spider-Man, and then the 1966 Batman. And all three of those were on in syndication. So that was my introduction to the world of like both superheroes, comics, sci-fi, all that sort of stuff. Um, and then, my mom recognized real early that this was something that had my imagination. So she started buying me comics even before I could read. And then on top of that, this was at a time when, you get the newspaper delivered to your
Yeah.
house. And my grandparents had a newspaper subscription. And so every day of the week, 7 days a week, you got the newspaper, and there was the funny section in there. So there was comic strips in there. So I grew up around like, that late 60s, early 70s nerd culture that was on TV, mostly in
Yeah.
repeats, and then comic books, and then newspaper strips, all of it. I fell in love with all of it, and my favorite superhero when I was a kid, my two favorite superheroes were Batman and Spider-Man. That's sort of how it is for a lot of kids of a certain age.
Yeah.
And then there was something, again, there was something about that captured my imagination. But what was really interesting was, I went to school with a girl whose dad was a syndicated cartoonist. He had a daily comic strip, and his name was Richard Cavalli, and he was a contemporary of Charles Schultz and Dick Brown and Mort Walker and all these guys.
Yeah.
And she brought her dad to school for show and tell. And he gave this demonstration about how he made his comic strips. And this was like, I want to say I was in second grade. And it was in that moment, really early age, that I saw, oh, somebody makes this, right? Because most of us, we read a comic, we watch a TV show, whatever, and it's almost like we assume it's done by
Yeah.
magic, right? But all that magic was stripped away at a really young age. And I was like, yo, you can do this? You can just take a pencil or a pen and make comics? That was it for me, man. So by the time I was like 6 or 7 years old, I really knew what I felt like I knew what I wanted to
Yeah.
do. And then there were some other things that, came along, but nothing ever deterred me from my love of comics, even working in comics, which ain't nothing going to kill that passion more than than than
No,
uh
you
than it becoming your
started
job.
about like me. You just had a passion for it, and again, I'm kind of in that same range of Beetle Bailey, Mort Walker, Blondie,
Oh yeah.
type of thing. Hager the Horrible, all that kind of all that kind of age there. Um, Now you're seeing comics, and you brought up the point of Sunday. The Sunday papers. It used to be like thick. The comic
Yeah.
section used to be thick, and I've had a couple of syndicated, a few syndicated King Feature syndicated artists on the show, and I've kind of asked them just the progression, and actually uh, Curtis, creator Curtis was on, and I was asking him just because he's a little of the older guard, and he was telling me about some of his kind of stories with Charles Schultz and knowing
Yeah.
him and that kind of thing. But just I've always been fascinated with just the progression of technology, where you see it's going as far as the comics industry, especially with things going digital now. Do you feel like that physical book is ever going in a way, or do you think there's always going to be this love for the physical copy of a comic?
I hope it doesn't go away. I'm not I won't go so far as to say I hate digital, reading comics digitally, reading books digitally. If I left to my own devices, I would not do it at all. But but I do it from time to time, but for my generation, Gen X, like it's still about physical media,
Yeah,
right? And yeah, something can happen. You can have a fire, there could be a flood, you could lose your books, you could lose your comics, all that sort of stuff. But it's nothing quite like when, some digital provider decides, oh, the license is up, right? We're seeing this now with a lot of movies, a
yeah,
lot of TV shows where streamers are like, oh, we're taking this off, right? It was, there was a time, I would say about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, where, I was really into digital comics through Comixology before it was bought by Amazon.
yeah,
And it was this great way to find indie stuff but that's all kind of gone away. And what I can tell you is, now that I'm a little bit more established in my career, done work for a bunch of different publishers, I can access oftentimes the sales figures for physical versus digital.
yeah,
And I can tell you that with my books anyway, digital don't amount to nothing,
yeah.
right? It's such a tiny percentage of where the sales are. And and I don't know. I feel like I would rather go into a bookstore, a comic book store, and pull something off the shelf, read the back,
Yeah.
flip through it a little bit. You can't do any of that digitally. So, but I'm also an old man. I'm grumpy. So
Well,
I don't want it to go
I think
away.
there's something. Obviously, I think there's something to be said for that one that gets that first edition. Who do I'm pretty sure
Mhm.
whoever's got the first edition of Spider-Man or the original Spider-Man and Superman and all those, classics, comic books, they're loving the fact that they've got, a hard copy that's the first edition, or, the very first, one of the very first ones drawn. So I don't know. I think like you. I like to think that that's not going anywhere. Digital is just another form, but I think there's something about having, like you said, holding a physical thing.
Yeah.
And being able to read it, see the artwork, and really appreciate, everything that goes into
And
it.
and for me, and maybe it's more of a generational thing, but it's there's a lot of out of sight, out of mind for me, right? So I struggle to remember what books I have with the physical books, but they're on the shelf. I'll go in sometimes, like not that long ago, I still have a lot of the not the Kindle, excuse me, the Comixology library of stuff that I purchased. It hasn't been yanked down yet,
Yeah.
but I was looking for something through my on my tablet, and I went in and I was like, yo, I own this? Like I forgot that I had purchased, and specifically it was I have I think it's the entire run of Marvel's Werewolf by Night,
Oh wow.
which was a series that I really enjoyed in the 70s and the early 80s. And I had completely forgotten that I had it, right? And so whereas I know where all my Marvel, specifically my Marvel Monster stuff
Yeah.
is, right? Like I've got collections of, you know, Frankenstein and Son of Satan and Vampire Tales and Morbius and Tomb of Dracula. I got all this stuff. Werewolf by Night is the only one I didn't have a physical copy of, so I forgot I had it.
Wow.
You know, and I can't remember what I was looking for where I stumbled across the fact that I had it, and I was like, okay, I got it, and I still haven't looked at it. So
Well, how do you feel like Marvel and, obviously the explosion of, movies and now taking the characters in the movies, how do you feel like that's kind of hurt the industry, help the industry, or done? Because obviously Marvel is a big thing now and it's a big
Yeah.
machine and they've got a big catalog of characters to go through and develop.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag because I can tell you that um most people, first off, a lot of the people who discover Marvel, we'll use Marvel as an example more than DC, but a lot of people will discover Marvel characters through the movies or the TV shows, stuff on Disney Plus. Um, but a lot of, just because they discover the characters doesn't mean they switch mediums and then go over to read the comics, whether it's digitally or
Yeah.
physically. And so to me that's always a problem. But then an equal problem is that Marvel, and I've always been critical of this, they've never done a good job of making it easily accessible for new readers. So as an example, when Black Panther came out in 2018, all these kids all over the world are going to see Black Panther. They're falling in love with the character, and but what book would you start at, right? Like, we have this Christopher Priest omnibus which is $100 or whatever, the Reggie Hudlin omnibus, and these are all good books, but are they good entry points, especially for, like, say, a reader who's, like, we'll say between the ages of 8 and 14 years old? And I've long held that for the most part, none of those collections really work. There's not a good gateway collection for people that are coming in from another medium. So I've long held that, I'm one of those people who's like, yeah, Marvel should have a line that's purely like set within the universe of the movies, right? An extension of that. But at the end of the day, what people get confused with is they're in the business to make money. Like, that's all they're in. They're not in business to make the best comics they can make. I mean, sometimes they make good comics, but a lot of times it's just like they're churning stuff out, and they're churning stuff out for what is, I believe, a steadily shrinking audience. And the reason it's steadily shrinking is because they're not doing enough to bring in new readers. And I was just talking with some folks about this recently because I wrote a Power Man and Iron Fist series for Marvel. This was like almost 10-15 years ago, and those two characters have since had their own series on Netflix. Now those, you can watch them on Disney Plus, whatever. But both Power Man, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist have shown up in the new season of Daredevil. And there's all these rumors that they're going to get another TV show. Every single issue of Power Man and Iron Fist I wrote is out of print. There's no, you can't buy the physical. You can buy the physical collections used. But you can't order them from a store. You can read them on the Marvel Unlimited app. But so again, to me, that's just bad business, right? It's bad business on their part. For me, it's bad business because I ain't getting no royalty checks because people aren't buying these things, right? So
wow. And then, like you said, it is a business, and they kind of look at it. And I know a lot of, or at least I've heard a lot of, like, creators, are saying that, non-comic book fans, they're executives, so they're not like some of them aren't like true fans that really know the story, or they'll change it to kind of fit whatever, they feel is going to make money or bring the people into the theaters. Do you think that's a part of it? Is that, you got executives that aren't like, just diehard comic book fans. You got some directors that are, but the ones that are putting backing the money, obviously the directors have to fight with the producers. Some directors do have to fight with the producers to get this in or get that in, and the producers want to direct and that type of thing, of putting things in that aren't necessarily in the comics, or because I guess comic book
Yeah.
diehard fans always look at it like how it was in the book, and they're expecting Marvel or DC or whoever it is to kind of follow the storyline of how the character goes.
Well, and it's an interesting, that's an interesting dynamic because the comic is the comic and the movie is the movie, the TV show is the TV show, and I don't have a problem with things changing within an adaptation, because I can look at like some of the greatest movies of all time are adapted from books. Jaws is adapted from a book, and To Kill a Mockingbird is adapted from a book, and these are great books and great movies, but they're not necessarily great adaptations. They change a whole lot. The things that they changed in Jaws were tremendous.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my favorite movies as a kid was Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes, and that movie is the only thing that movie has in common with the original novel is there's apes that can talk. That's about it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's understanding the difference. Now, what happens to me, and I have this conversation pretty regularly when it comes to the adaptation of comics, is there respect for the medium? You have to respect two things. You have to respect the medium, and you have to respect what the story is about or what the character is about in its heart and soul, right? So Spider-Man, if you're not making a Spider-Man movie or TV show or whatever, that if you're making something and it's not about with great power comes great responsibility, you have failed completely, right? You can change a million things about Spider-Man. Oh, it's organic web shooters or mechanical web shooters, stuff like that. I don't care about any of that stuff. What I care about is Peter Parker, has he learned the most valuable lesson we all can learn, right? And so I see a lot of adaptations where it feels to me like they didn't respect the medium and the medium as a whole, and they didn't necessarily respect the source. And by the source I mean, like, it's like Batman, and suddenly, but in this version he's not an orphan, right? Because his parents lived. Well, the moment you change something like that big, and for the longest time there was this belief that you had to change it. That's why there was so few superhero adaptations, right? When I was a kid, like, you got the Incredible Hulk with Bill Bixby and Lou Ferrigno, and that was it. You shut up and you loved it, right? You loved Nicholas Hammond in Spider-Man, even though the costume looked like some pajamas, the effects were terrible, but it was, but this is all we got, right? And then in terms of movies, there was so little because there was that lack of respect for the medium was pervasive in Hollywood. It's why there was no live action Batman from like 1968 or so, when the TV show with Adam West and Burt Ward was canceled, to 1989. So we're talking, there was a 20-year gap where there was almost no Batman, and it was because people were like, well, no one's going to go see this movie. It's a ridiculous character. That was the thinking in Hollywood. And there's a reason why before they cast Michael Keaton, Bill Murray was up for the part, right? Bill Murray as Batman. Like, and when Michael Keaton
he got enough flack for it.
And everybody was like, oh man, this is gonna be terrible. The dude from Beetlejuice and
Night Shift,
Night Shift and all that stuff. But I remember at one point going, but wait a minute, have you all seen Clean and Sober? Which was his first drama. And I remember watching that and going, okay, maybe it'll be all right. So I think the big problem is this, and then you get filmmakers, writers, directors, and producers who think they can come up with something better, right? Like again, going back to Spider-Man, if you leave out with great power comes great responsibility, and you think you can do something better, then what are you doing making Spider-Man?
Yeah.
Because that's what Spider-Man
Yeah, the
is,
core
right?
of who Spider-Man.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the core of who he is. Just like Bruce Wayne being orphaned, his parents getting killed. That's the
yeah,
core of what made Batman and who made Batman. So, or how Batman is. So there are, like you said, some core elements that you just can't change. You just shouldn't change. You know.
yeah.
Um, but do you feel like this now they're going into all these multiverses? That's what allows them to do all of these kind of things, or make all these kind of changes that may
Yeah.
not kind of fit.
It's when you're a kid and you're playing a game with some other kids and something goes wrong, and you call for a do-over, right? Like, because as a child, it's like, oh, I don't like the way things are going. We just get to do a do-over and start all over again, right? And that's what it feels like a lot of times with this, I'll call it the filmed entertainment side of things, is like they just want to do a do-over because they didn't quite like how they did it last time, but they want to keep making money on it, right? Like, how many Superman reboots have we gotten in,
Mm,
since 1978, right?
yeah,
And better yet, how many Batman? Like, they're putting out, they don't even waste time.
no,
At least when I was a kid, there was some time in between different actors playing James Bond, you know. And you would kind of wonder, well, is Roger Moore's getting kind of old, but okay, they're going to give him one
yeah.
more.
I
Oh,
think
I
he
don't
can do
know.
one more slide over the car before we have to get in a new
Yeah,
James Bond.
and but there's this, again, like I was saying, when we were kids, when I was a kid anyway, it was you know, there was 3 years in between Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. Those 3 years came out over a 9 year
Yeah,
span. Now it'd be more likely a 6 year span, if not less.
yes, yeah,
We're seeing more and more movies. So I don't necessarily know if I subscribe to the, when they talk about superhero fatigue, but I do know that I feel like I can't keep up with everything, right? Like I haven't seen every Marvel show. I haven't seen every Marvel movie, but then there'll be moments where I'm like, "Yo, how come I'm confused watching this movie?"
yeah.
My friends will be like, "Oh, well, that's because you didn't
Watch
watch,
this
you
that
know,
connected
this one."
this.
And if you have to watch everything and pay for everything in order to understand one thing, then I feel like maybe you're doing something
Yeah,
wrong, right? Like, I would watch soap operas with my grandmother. I would watch her stories, General Hospital, All My Children, and you could miss 6 months of that show and then come back, and within 2 days you'd figure it out. You'd figure out what's
yeah.
going
You're
on.
pretty much
But
caught
I've
up.
watched Yeah, but I've watched some Marvel stuff where I'm like, whoa, wait, wait. Like, literally, when I saw Spider-Man Brand New Day, and what's her name? The other Black Widow showed up. I can't think of her name,
Oh,
but I was
Scarlett
like,
Johansson, was it?
no, the other Florence Pugh's character,
Oh, okay.
because I still haven't seen Thunderbolts,
Yeah, I
right?
haven't watched that
And then
either.
the moment it pops up, she pops up in Spider-Man. I was like, oh boy, like, clearly there's a story going on here that I don't know what it
Uh,
is.
and I think they're doing that intentionally, so like you said, so that you do go watch, because especially lately, a lot of the Marvel movies are interconnected. So if you, like you said, you see
Yeah,
characters that are introduced or subtly kind of put in, and then they're moved into the next one, and they're kind of all going by threes. Like, I think they're signing all these actors to at least a trilogy, at least a three picture
I
deal.
think they, I think they sign everybody to like a 9 movie commitment, right? So it's
Yeah,
like
something
you get three
insane.
movies that you're centered on, and then the six where oh, you're going to be in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, and then whatever. And here's the thing for me, man. I just like reading comics. right?
Yeah.
And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. I've been teaching at Portland State University for over 10 years. I teach in the comic studies program, and I can't tell you how many students come in. And first day of class, we're taught do introductions, say a little bit about yourself, and I would say more than half of my students were in the comic studies program taking a class on writing for comics,
Mm.
and they all say the same thing. Oh, I've never really read a comic before, but I really like the movies.
Uh,
And then I'm like, well, then you're in the wrong
yeah.
class. You need to be in a screenwriting class, because I'm not going to teach you how to write a screenplay. I'm going to teach you how to write for this particular
Medium.
medium.
Yeah.
And I see with a lot of creators out there, I talk to them and they're like, yeah, I just hope this gets optioned, and I hope this and I hope that. And I'm like, yeah, I just hope people read my book.
Yeah.
That's what I really want. I've had stuff optioned. It feels good for a little bit, and then it's like, but if you always run the risk that they're going to make garbage out of what you've
Yeah. Yeah. But I think
so
that comes from the true comic book fan that just, they love comic book. We were talking about this before the show. You were at Comic Palooza, comic convention here in Houston. I mean, and that's always fascinated me, because I've had a few comic book artists and friends come on the show, and just this thing of kind of having to make the rounds, kind of thing
yeah.
of getting your comic out there and really, you get a table, and really pushing your comic. Are you starting, or are you seeing that comics, the comic artists, that you're seeing at these conventions, they're doing it more for the love of the comic, rather than trying to see if they can create something that will get picked up or optioned, from a thing. Do you think artists are kind of trying to go that route, because everybody is going to movies and that's where they think the big money is and that type of thing?
That's a great question. I think, in my this is just my perception. I see a lot of indie creators out there, and it feels like their end goal is to get a deal, film, TV, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. I honestly don't believe there's anything wrong with having that as a goal. But I think that if you're making comics, you need to be making comics, and you need to be making the best comics that you can possibly make, not putting together the best pitch package proof of concept, right? So when I write a comic or a graphic novel, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think about, oh, maybe so and so will option this, and maybe it'll get turned into a multi-million-dollar movie. I like, that's just not how my brain is wired. But also from a creative standpoint, I feel like a lot of times you can tell when that happens. I pick stuff up and I talk to creators, and they're like, and the first thing, one of the first things they ask me is, oh, how did you get your film deal, or how did you get your TV deal?
Mm.
They don't ask me, hey, how did you find your artist, or what made you decide to self-publish,
Yeah.
or how did you get a publisher? They ask me the other thing, right? And I always say, well, I got the deal because I made the dopest comic you're ever going to read in your life,
Yeah.
right? Because that's me. That's my giant ego.
Yeah. And let me ask you that, because I have found that, when I do talk to, comic book writers and indie comic book creators, they have found this one artist that they love working with, that just, gets their art. How hard is it to find that one that, you just love working with? It's easy to work with. He gets your writing and you get his artwork and it just fits together. Finding that right illustrator that gets the right visuals to your words, is that how challenging is that?
I'd say it's the most challenging thing I've ever experienced in my life, right? It's I've had friends who are artists, and we tried to work together, and we're not friends anymore. I've had people who I've had to fire. I've had people who, again, hate me. people that I'm not that fond of. It's really, really difficult. And because it comes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, where it's like, okay, I get it. You want to make money off of your art, and you want to, maybe you want a TV show, you want some sort of production deal. But if the number one goal is not making the best book possible, then what are you doing here? And there's a couple artists that I really love working with, and we work well together, and so you'll see me coming back to collaborations with them. But if an artist is really good and relatively easy to work with, they're going to be in demand,
Yeah.
right? And so you know and to me, I might work with an artist who's a little bit slower than I want them to be, but there's something about their work that's worthy of my waiting
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I mean, I can tell you, I've had some experiences, and making comics ain't for the faint of heart. I saw somebody do a video, I think it was on YouTube or something, maybe TikTok, but they were talking about how much easier it is to make comics versus making movies,
Mm.
right? And that person was 100% wrong. It is easier to make a movie than it is to make a comic, because I've made them both, you know, and and um, and when you're working in comics, you're usually only working with two or three people, maybe, right?
Yeah.
You're working with, as your artist, maybe there's a colorist, maybe there's an inker, there's a letterer, but in reality, you may only be working with one other
Yeah.
person. It's anywhere between two people and say five, six
Yeah.
people, right?
I can see that.
Um, and but if your artist disappears, and um and what happens to those pages? Maybe you made the most elementary mistake we all make, which is giving somebody money up front.
Mm.
And so you're scrimping and saving your money together, and you got a few $1,000s to do your comic, and you hire this artist who you like, and maybe they're even your friend, and you give them, say, $2,000-3,000, right? Because personally, I don't know anybody walking around with spare $3,000 in their pocket, right? But
Not really.
if that artist disappears, decides they don't want to do the work, take on another gig because they need more money,
Yeah.
you're out that $3,000, right? And it's not to say that film stuff can't be difficult and challenging too, but if you have an actor or an actress who isn't pulling their weight, or they're becoming difficult, you can rewrite the script and have them killed off camera, and that's it. Um, I say it all the time. It's not that I would never work with my friends, but I would be careful about the friends I choose to work with.
Yeah. 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 No, that's usually the first advice they get you. Don't work with family
Yeah,
or friends. Unless, like you
yeah.
said, unless you really know and have that kind of relationship with them, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to do. When would you mentioned this a minute ago? What are the determining factors for you for, say, a comic book artist to go indie or not indie? And what would be the challenge? And what would you say should be the things that an indie creator should kind of keep in mind, when they're starting out and thinking about this, if they want to do and produce their own comic?
I think the biggest thing is look at the resources you have, and by resources I mean who are the artists you might know, how much money do you have to spend? And so I was just talking to an artist a couple days ago who wants to journey into writing, and he wants to hire an artist to work for him. He doesn't want to draw this comic
Yeah.
himself, and it's a pretty epic story. It's over 100 pages. And I said to him, well, before you hire an artist to do these 100 pages, and before you commit to writing this 100-page story, write a 10-page story, hire an artist to do 10 pages. Because I guarantee you, if you cannot make a 10-page story work, and I'm talking both from a story structure standpoint, but also the execution of hiring an artist, putting together, you can't do it in 10 pages. You're never going to be able to do it in 100. Now, you may be able to get that 100 pages done, but you are going to make a ton of mistakes. Better to make those mistakes in increments of 10 pages and then 20 pages and then 30 pages. So by the time you get to the 100-page project, you're not making a lot of the same mistakes, right? So I always encourage people to start off really short with a short story, but it should be a short story that speaks to your abilities as a writer. And anybody who tells me that they can't tell a good story in 10 pages, because excuse me, most people have an idea in their head that's epic, right? It's like, oh, I want to do 50 issues of this comic, right? And I'm like, great, you want to do 50 issues of this comic? I want you to take this comic, this concept, these characters, and distill it into a story that can be told in 10 pages. And then, and my students will always say, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, do me a favor and go back and read the first appearance of Spider-Man. Because the first appearance of Spider-Man is 11 pages. And in those 11 pages was everything a reader needs to know about Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Everything. And you look at the first Superman story, the first Batman story, each of those under 20 pages, right? The first issue of Fantastic Four, I think, is like 18 pages. Now, there's a lot to be said for the longevity of these characters, these series, but it all starts with that first appearance, that first story. And it's like, again, Amazing Fantasy number 15, first appearance of Spider-Man. That was the issue that was going to be canceled. It was a throwaway story. Most people know that story by now, but it's 11 pages. And if you can't do what Stan Lee and Steve Ditko did, that's what you should be striving for. You shouldn't be striving for like, oh, what, Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons did with Watchmen. No, you should not be striving for that first time out the gate, right? And I remember one of the first scripts I wrote as a comic writer was the book that I had as a Bible, and this is going back like 30 years ago, was Watchmen. I had a collection of Watchmen, and I was studying that book, and I was like, yo, he's got 9 panels to a page, and look at everything that's happening in this page. And I wrote this story, and then every artist I went to that I could approach and potentially afford, they were all like, I can't do this. and I was like, well, Dave Gibbons did it, like it wasn't occurring to me, because the thing that most of us don't take into consideration is that that comic that we read or that movie that we see that inspires us and influences us, we're not seeing the first draft of it. We're seeing the end product of years and years of something. Right. So
sure. Everybody just jumping in. We're finally having a fun conversation with my guest and friend, David Walker, founder and comic book writer with Solid Comics. Mr. A. Let me see if I can get this in. A little bit of both. I know we were talking about just digital versus hard copy. I mean, I'm kind of like you. I like a little bit of both, but for me, I always like a physical, and I think I still have some of my Spider-Mans and a couple of Luke Cages. I was into Luke Cage as a kid as well, but definitely Spider-Man. Let me throw this in here. Art of 3-dimensional characters. I'm not a multiverse fan. I mean, I think that's a thing now for the studios are really latching on to, because it does allow them to just go and do, just weave stories in and out, weave versions in and out type of thing. So I don't know how well that plays over with the actual creators of it, like you said, we're starting to see this this kind of rehash of stories and characters and movies. Um, you're on, you've been on the kind of, Comic Con, circuit, and you go to a lot of these conventions and things like that. Um, are you encouraged about, just new characters, new stories coming out, and new type of things? Because I think when you're sitting down to develop a character and you're thinking about it, is there any new superpower or any new? I guess they say there really isn't anything new under the sun. It's just the way you kind of package it and
Yeah,
and
that's
put
it.
it together. But are you starting to be encouraged with the characters and the stories that you're starting to see creators do?
Yeah, a lot of it is more about the creators than the stories themselves, right? And I don't look to Marvel or DC at all or for hope for that matter, right? So what I'm looking at is what indie creators are doing. The folks that I meet at conventions or the projects that I back on Kickstarter. I backed something on Kickstarter the other day, which is a series called Crescent City
Oh
Monsters
yeah,
by
Newton.
by
Yeah, I had
Newton
Newton on. Yeah,
Lillois.
yeah, Newton.
And yeah, and like that to me is like something that's a series, and I'm like, oh, this is I love the art, I love the story, I love the writing. My friend Jason Reeves at who's 133 Art, he reached out to me about writing an intro for his omnibus for One Nation. And I was like, yeah, of course, right? Like this is sort of stuff that I'm looking at all the time. Um, you're talking to somebody who has over 50 years of reading superhero stuff. So it takes a lot for me to go, oh, this is something fun. This is something that I haven't seen before.
Yeah,
And I'm just more than anything, I'm just looking for something fun.
yeah,
Like I'm not even looking for something I haven't seen before. But at the same time, I think that this medium as a whole, the possibilities are much greater than most people realize. So, when someone pitches something to me and they're like, oh, this is my superhero thing, and it's a shared universe, and I'm doing something with this publisher over here, and we're going to do a big event book. And I'm like, okay, thanks. I'm not buying that.
yeah.
Right. Like I stopped reading Marvel and DC for over 10 years because of that reason. Right. I don't want to have to, and having written for those companies, the worst experience I had at Marvel was writing around one of their big summer events, right? Where
Mm.
suddenly the book you're writing is disrupted, the characters are disrupted, and now maybe you have like, six guidelines that editorial mandates for your series that you're writing, and suddenly those six mandates go up to 12. And it's all because, oh, the cast of your series is going to be part of the Avengers versus the Muppets, right? And so
Well, you mentioned Kickstarter. A lot of people are doing, and I think as far as like Kickstarter campaigns, comic books are pretty high up there as far as just
yeah,
creators doing Kickstarter campaigns. And you mentioned Crescent City. That was the very reason I kind of reached out when I first came across Newton and saw Crescent City.
yeah,
I was like, wow, I never really seen like horror what he was doing in
yeah,
comics with black characters. I never really saw that. And I was like, wow, that's an interesting take, because
yeah,
again, we're usually the first get killed off and that type of thing. And we're not in horror and all of that. And I was like, okay, that's something fresh and new that I think, and plus the stories and the artwork were just fabulous, So
yeah.
do you feel like a lot of creators now are taking advantage of platforms like Kickstarter and self funding, which opens up the door for more indie creators so they don't feel like they have to be rushing to Marvel or get into Marvel or feel like they have to get a big studio or big publishing company to back them?
Here's the truth. If you're not willing and prepared to self-publish, then you're not willing or prepared to be in the industry. Like the way the industry, the direction it's going, even myself with all of the work that I've done, I still have to struggle to find a publisher, right? And um, and then when you do find a publisher, they don't necessarily want to pay a fair page rate, and they want to own a significant chunk of your intellectual property.
Mm,
I say this all the time. Look, when I'm writing a book, I'm writing a book. When I'm writing a graphic novel, I'm writing a graphic novel. I'm not worried about the film or the TV version. I don't care if there is one, but I do care that if someone decides to make something out of something I've co-created, like that publisher does not own any of it.
yeah.
They don't have any control over any of it. And in the book publishing world, traditional book publishing world, they don't hold on to the rights the same way comic book publishers do. Comic book publishers are notoriously gangster about what they consider work for hire. Yeah. The entire industry was built on that business model, and they continue with it. And it's like, even with a work for hire agreement, they will try to screw you out of the money. I've heard the stories and I've lived the stories, right? And so for me, you know, I've been self-publishing stuff through Kickstarter, funding it, partially funding it through Kickstarter. And people ask me, well, why are you doing this? Like you've worked for all these major publishers. Why would you continue to do this? And that, you know, and then they say, well, you know, clearly this thing you've done, it must not be that good if you've got to self-publish it. And I'm like, no, it's actually the best thing I've ever done. You know, the problem is like the business side of things, like to put this into context, I just the Monster of Blackenstyne, which was a Kickstarter I did earlier this year. Monster of Blackenstyne, not to be confused with Blackenstein, did the Kickstarter this year. And on my own, self-publishing it, you know, partially funding it through Kickstarter, I sold more copies of that book than the last major book I did for a publisher. Right?
Yeah.
Exact same, like, and that publisher uses those poor sales against me to say, well, that last book we published of yours didn't do well, so we're, you know,
Yeah.
we don't think we can do something else with you. And it's like, well, it didn't do well. Well, why didn't it do well? Right? It's where, you know, how much money did you spend on marketing? How much promotion did you do? You know, you're the one who has all the press contacts. How come I wasn't on NPR? How come I wasn't on Comic Book Resources? Like you're supposed to have a departments and people working for you that make it so that the book sells better. But instead, what a lot of publishers will do is like, oh, we're just going to do, you know, we're going to do 20 variant covers. And that's what passes for marketing in this
and
world.
That's always so. You made such a great point as far as like you really, if you're going to go that route of, you know, getting a studio or a publisher, you're going to have to depend on them to really believe it and put the marketing behind it. Otherwise, you know, it could be just one of those ones that, like you said, they don't believe it. They don't feel like it's going to really do anything. So they're not dumping money into it. And you see this with movies all the time. You know, they'll dump tons of money into a movie that just tanks, but then other movies, they don't put, you know, as much money or much marketing into it, and it just does well, you know, and it just blows up.
Yeah.
I want you to kind of, because like I said, the reason I, you know, reached out was I saw this and I was like, man, this is a cool character. What was the origin of Blackenstein? And then what do you mean not to be confused with Blackenstein?
Well, one of the worst movies of all time is a movie called Blackenstein. It's a blaxploitation movie, came out in 1975. It's a ripoff of Blackula, which is a great movie. But Blackenstein is a terrible, terrible movie. So bad, in fact, that I've spent decades obsessing over how bad it is and what a missed opportunity it is. And then I, at some point, hated that movie so much that I decided I wanted to do something with the character called Blackenstein. only not to be confused with Blackenstein, right? So,
So, Gil, tell us
um, no, it
the
was a,
premise of it, and kind of your origin of putting it together. What's it about?
it was just, it's, it's a very, in a lot of ways, it's a very straightforward homage to the classic monster movies, going all the way back to the 30s monster stories. It's just about a monster, about a mad scientist who isn't really a scientist, who creates a monster out of a dead body, and then that dead body goes on a rampage, right? But in this case, that monster is is a black man, and I loved all the Frankenstein movies when I was a kid. They were always on TV. The ones, like Boris Karloff and different actors played the monster. Glenn Strange and Lon Chaney Jr. Even Bela Lugosi played the monster at one point. So I was always fascinated with that character. I love blaxploitation, and I love really dark comedy and satire.
Yeah.
And so I did all that, and I had come up with this design for the monster, and really I was just initially was like, man, I would just love to have you know uh people have their Frankenstein models and prints of Frankenstein, and and you never see anything like that with black characters or black monsters,
No.
right? And so that was sort of the thing, was initially like, I just want to have my own monster that I can have, I can put on my shelf. And so, but then I was like, yeah, but the character needs a story. And then there had been a story that had been circulating in my head for about 10-15 years, and I married the two. I was like, how do I take this monster that I have, and so that he's more than just a monster? Because that's the thing, right? Like, I grew up watching all the old Universal monster movies. I love Godzilla. I love movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yeah. There's so many things that I grew up watching, comics that I grew up reading, and they were always about something more, right? And that's what's dope about horror. That's what's dope about sci-fi, fantasy, is that when it's working on it, it should work on multiple levels. It should, work on just the baseline level, and then there's the message that some people will pick up on, it will resonate with some people, other people won't. And for me, with the creation of Blackenstein, the Monster of Blackenstein, was really driven by the character and the story really started to come together in 2020, when with the murder of George Floyd, right? It had been happening before that, right? And it happens, and now, and it continues to happen, but it was always, and it didn't even have to be a black person killed by the police, because Trayvon Martin wasn't killed by a cop. Just like Nolan Wells, we don't know who killed Nolan Wells yet, but we know, this was not a boating accident. You know what I'm saying? Not to make light of it,
is going on.
But there's always a moment early on, and they never let go of turning us into the monsters that deserved. They did it with Mike Brown. They did it with Eric Garner, where it was like, well, he stole some Skittles. And I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. And so for that, you killed him. Yeah. And so that's really what this is about. This is about how, from the very beginning of the Black experience in what we would call the New World, from the beginning of enforced forced servitude, Black folks have been treated as something other than human beings, right? And so we're one of two things. We're either like property that is on par with, cows and pigs and things like that, where we are beasts of burden. And if we weren't that, then we were monsters, right?
Well,
our humanity is taken from us. But I don't want to read that comic. I don't want to read something that heavy-handed. I want to read something that I'm like, oh, hey, this is fun. So like, that's what I set out to do, was to turn, systemic racism and oppression and police brutality into the funniest thing anyone's ever read.
That's a challenge there. Now that's a task there to turn that into something. Well, we're good at that. We're good at finding this humor in the struggles that we go through and going through it anyway. I think that's a, a, a superpower of being
No, that's
of being
and you
black.
know, my hero is one of my heroes is Richard Pryor.
Yeah.
And you know, if you really listen to Richard Pryor's comedy albums, especially his albums, like as funny as they are, they're not really funny. They're really sad and tragic,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And that's what we've specialized in. That's part of the Black experience, is turning tragedy into something else, whether it's comedy or whether it's music or whatever. So
Yeah, I'm gonna throw this up here because we're starting to get some feedback. As you know, I like an interactive show there. Let me throw this up. I know. Appreciate you as always, brother, showing up. Hey, David. Uh, you already won your thing, so I know you're the first comment coming in from our Instagram. You always watch from Instagram, uh, but he did have a question. Why do you feel like othering in PDX, which I'm not sure what that means, Donnell? Maybe it's a writing thing. Is its own specific jam? Maybe you can clarify that, unless you understand that, David. Why do you
okay,
feel?
read it again.
Why do you feel like othering in PDX?
Well, that means Portland. PDX is Portland.
Okay. I know he's over in that area, type of thing.
Yeah.
Why do you feel like othering in PDX is its own specific jam? Authoring,
Oh man.
othering. I guess that's what he means.
Well, I think that what they're getting at is, you know, Portland is a very white city,
Okay.
and in a very white state. It was founded as a state that was meant to be a white state, right? That's what it was, and it wasn't even. They didn't want slavery here. They just wanted white people, and they wanted to be left alone, right? And so, conversely, for a city its size, it has a. I haven't checked the latest census numbers, but we have a very disproportionately low, you know, African American population, and so you have to learn how to exist. You know, when you're in that type of environment, you have to learn how to exist in an environment where you may go days without seeing another black person, right? And and that it ain't like Houston, right? It ain't like Atlanta, where you know when there's certain cities when I go there, I'm like, oh, you know, it's like otherworldly in a good way. But here, and so I think that what that means is it's like you've got to, um, it means a lot. It means that you sometimes are alone in like, yo, did that dude just say something really racist to me?
Yeah.
And you don't even have nobody to ask. You're just sort of
Out there.
moving through it. And then creatively, you also can run into a problem where it's like, um, you know, you're like myself, I'm trying to express something, I'm trying to get at the heart of something, and there's like all the other creatives I know are white folks, and some of them might not understand what I'm trying to do, and you know, and it's not to say that they're dumb or they're ignorant. It's just that like their experiences are very different than mine, and I'm trying to talk about a specific thing. And when I was working on the Monster of Blackenstyne, that was like a big concern. I was like, yo, I don't, but it wasn't just I was worried, will white people get it? I was worried nobody would get it because I was doing something that was very different. And I had some friends that were like, yo, I just don't understand what you're trying to do. And then when they read the final comic, they're like, oh, okay, now I get it. And they all said the same thing. This is just like you, you know. And I was like, of course it is. You must have faith. You must have faith, my child.
Well, did you? I mean, how has it been? You know, with the reception of Blackenstein and getting it out there, have you found, like you said, more people, you know, get it, more white people don't get it, more black people get it, type of thing?
I I saw one person, I saw someone write a review of it. They called it heavy-handed, and I was like, yep, it is. That was my intention. And I don't think that you are getting the heavy-handed nature of it is done in a satirical comedic way. But so far, everybody, the response has been great. You know, working on the second issue right now, and it's written in a specific way that, you know, I never wanted it. It's like if I only got one issue done, like that would be
Yeah.
all, right?
Yeah.
That one issue has been successful enough. The people love the character enough. They love what I'm doing enough that I was like, okay, I'll do a second issue. And now with the second issue comes the promise of more
Yeah.
stories, right? You know, the promise of at least, I would say, 2 to 3 more full issues worth of
Yeah.
material, and then maybe
Yeah.
more. But because I'm self-publishing, doing stuff through Kickstarter, trying to raise money through my Patreon, a lot of it's like, oh, I need, I need people to go to the Patreon and sign
Yeah.
up even at the $1
Yeah.
level, because it all adds up after a
Yeah.
while.
And I tell people this on the show, and I talk about it a lot. I mean, it's great, you know, wanting to, self-publish or do your own thing, but that takes a lot of work, just as much work as if you were just trying to get into you know a studio, get you a 9 to 5, a
Yeah.
check. Like I said, putting a Kickstarter campaign, that's a whole job. Just making it
Oh, it's
successful.
people don't get it.
You can.
And if you're successful, if you're lucky, then if you're and you raise the money and you get all the backers, then you got to mail all that
Yeah.
stuff. And I spent, and look, I'm not complaining about it. I'm very fortunate, but I spent 3 weeks, 3 solid weeks, where my only job, my only job, was processing orders of the Monster of Blackenstyne, entering the information in, printing out weighing the packages, printing out the labels, gathering up boxes, and then driving to the post
Yeah.
office. 3 solid weeks. Now, that's because I was lucky, because I the campaign was more successful than I could have ever hoped it would be. But that was 3 weeks where I didn't get much of anything
Yeah.
else done. And so now I'm to a point where it's like, okay, the next projects I do, I need to figure out how to hire somebody to do that fulfillment so I can keep
Yeah.
working.
Yeah.
Because once you take a break from that creativity to do something that's sort of mind numbing, it can be a while to get that mojo
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. How long does it usually take you, from sitting down, okay, I got this, I'm going to put this comic together, but until you get it to the artist, until you're ready to get it to the artist, how long does it usually take you to flesh out and put together a comic? And I'm pretty sure it depends on how many pages it's going to be, but your
It's
typical one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can write a script in, like, if you're talking like a Marvel script or a DC script, which is anywhere from 20 to 24 pages, I can usually write that in a couple, a week. Sometimes even more quickly if it all comes to me. The second issue of Blackenstein, I wrote in probably a day and a half, right? Like the first draft of it was in a day and a half. And I reached out to Marcello, the artist, Marcello Di Chiara, and I was like, yo, are you available to do another story? And he was like, yep. And I said, okay, I'm going to send you the first half of it. It's going to be a 24-page story broken up into two 12-page chapters. Here's the first 12 pages, get started. And so by the time he's done with those 12 pages, I'll be done with the second 12
Yeah.
pages. Um, but again, a lot of it depends on the project, and sometimes I'll send stuff off to an artist and I'm as to, oh, I should have waited. Like there's something better came up in my imagination, but they've already drawn this stuff. I'm not going to ask them to redraw anything. I'll just rewrite the script accordingly.
Yeah. So when you're sitting down writing your story, you're not thinking about so much the angle or camera angle or how it's going to look panel wise. Are you trusting the artist to kind of, like you said, take your words and figure out how you break it up? Or are you telling them, hey, or do you have an idea of how you're wanting the book to look broken up into panels?
I know exactly how I want it to look panel by panel, page by page, the flow, all of it. And I usually put it together with stick figures and stuff like that first. Now I don't show that to the artist necessarily, or yeah, I don't show it to the artist. I then will take those notes and then use those to write the script. But everything I see it all first. If I don't see it, I can't write it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I need to make sure that the flow works, all that sort of stuff. And then depending on the artist, Marcello, I don't have it laying around here, but again, the second issue of Blackenstein, it started out with the page layouts, not even with what was I had a beat for, okay, page 1, this will happen, page 2, this will happen, page 3, this will happen, but it was very general. And then I designed the pages first, and then I wrote to fill in the panels that were in this grid that I had done. And then I sent him the script, and then he reinterpreted what I'd written, and it wasn't exactly how I envisioned it, but it all worked except for one page. There was one page where what I had come up with was really crucial that he stick to it. Yeah. And I just wrote him a note and said, hey man, I love what you've done. It's just the order and the flow of the panels a specific way. Yeah. So, but not everybody does it that way. Yeah. I mean, I went to art school. I'm a guy who gave up on his artistic abilities. I gave up. I didn't have the patience, but I understand it, and I talk to when I talk to other comic book artists, they'll be like, oh, who are your influences, this, that, and the other. And I'm like, oh, I'm I study all the time, especially older stuff. Guys like, Wally Wood, Alex Toth, Jack Kirby, Will Eisner, like those are the people that I really learned how to make comics from. Yeah. By studying their work.
Yeah. You've been, and I'm going to throw some comments up here because we're getting some great comments. Paul Brown, salute Don and David, loving the conversation. Appreciate it, Paul. Definitely don't make this your last go round for sure. I evidently Donnell met you. We met at Lev's house. Our buddy John McCrae from Cake was there. Yeah. Yep. Actually, Donnell, we're grade school friends. We grew up together, so okay. That's wild, Donnell. That's wild that you know. So I appreciate you, like I said, tuning in. You've been doing this, like you said, for a while. You worked, for Marvel, DC, and done stuff. What's been the best advice that you've been given that's kind of helped you on your journey so far? That maybe a veteran or somebody, doesn't even have to be a veteran, but just some good advice that somebody's given and sown into you that's kind of helped you continue on this journey.
Well, I think the best advice anyone ever gave me was you got to finish it, right? It's not perfect, but it's got to be done. Yeah. And that's why I always say do something short, because like it could take a year to get a 10-page story done. If you don't hook up with the right artist and if you don't have enough money to pay them. So if you've got a 150-page story, it could take forever. Yeah. But you're never going to learn how to do it until you do it. Yeah. Right. And so there's a big difference between reading the driver's manual and actually driving a car. Yeah. Right. And it's the same thing. You can read every book about how to make movies, watch a million videos about how to make movies, but you ain't going to know how to make a movie until you make a movie. Yeah. You're not going to know how to make a comic until you've made a comic. And I would add, until you've made a comic and not done it that well, right? It's now you may think it's the dopest thing in the world. You may think it's the greatest thing in the world, but you're wrong, and you should always be striving to make something better. Yeah. And it's not to say that you should be ashamed of what you've done, like own it all, right? But, I have people walk up to me at conventions and they'll hand me their comic and they're acting like, yo, this is the best thing you ever going to read. And I'm like, well, is it better than, and I hold up a book you know, or I'll just hold up my own stuff. I'm like, is it going to be better than something I could do? You know, and when I see something that's really dope, I will tell the person, I'll tell the creator, and I will, you know, I'll give them shout outs. But it's hard to make comics. It's hard to do just about anything
Yeah.
creative, right? But the only thing harder is living with the regret of not having done it,
Yeah.
living with the regret of the unfinished project, right? And so the best advice anyone ever gave me was to just finish it, right? And to make sure you know what your story's really about, right? Because a lot of times it's people like I'll go back to Spider-Man as the best example, because I think Spider-Man is in the top 10 greatest fictional characters of the 20th century, right? And that's saying a lot,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, well, what's Spider-Man about? People say, oh, it's about a kid who gets bitten by a radioactive spider and you know, and becomes a superhero. It's like, no, that's not what Spider-Man's about. Spider-Man is about, with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so he could have had anything. He could have been bitten by a radioactive parakeet. You know what I'm saying? And become, you know, the parakeet kid. But it's that with great power comes great responsibility, that theme that runs through it. And so I know when I'm writing something, I don't always know exactly what it's about sometimes. So sometimes the first draft is done and I'm still not quite sure. And it's what I call, you know, some people would call it the theme. I just call it the heart and soul of your story. And so you got to know what the heart and soul of your story is. And if the heart and soul of your story is, I really want to get a deal on Netflix, then I'm guessing you're not going to make something that good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, even before the story, do you sit and flesh out like or flesh out the characters as a backstory of, you know, where the origin of them or their personality? Do you? I think because I'm when I talked to Donnell about this, as far as, you know, just being able to write. I'm not a writer, but definitely it's something, you know, that I'm trying to develop
Mhm.
more skills at, because I have ideas in my head. But sitting down to write a story and you're writing about characters, do you already know who that character is before you put it down, or do you flesh out like who, say even like Peter Parker, before I draw a panel or something like that? Do I flesh out who Peter is as a person, his backstory, before I have even put him in a situation of, okay, he's fighting
I,
this guy, that guy?
I try to have a pretty good understanding of the characters um, before I start writing them. But they, at time, there'll always be something revealed to me later, and and this is also important. I don't tell everything right away, you know. So, um, you know, the monster of Blackenstein. Who was he before he became a monster, right? So I knew who he was before he became a monster, and part of who he was is in that first issue. But like, there's so much about him people don't know, and they'll get to see some of it, and some of it will just be hinted at, right? You don't need to know every single thing, right? um, and that's a problem a lot of writers do, is they, you know, a lot of creatives, they it's everything in the kitchen sink in the first you know, their first issue, the
Mm-hmm.
first movie. And sometimes all you need, like, I'll go back to Spider-Man Brand New Day. Like, I don't ever want to see what happened on Staten Island with Spider-Man and the Punisher. Like, you know, for those people that have seen the movie, they keep talking about what happened on Staten Island, but they never tell us what happened on Staten Island. I get to imagine it.
Yeah.
If they make a movie about what happened on Staten Island, I'm going to hate that movie,
Yeah.
because 99% of the time when they do stuff like that, you know, when I was a kid, I remember seeing Star Wars, the first Star Wars, and Han Solo says, "You never heard of the Millennium Falcon? It's the only ship to make the Kessel Run in under 12
Yeah.
parsecs." And the way he said it with such confidence and swagger, I didn't know what the Kessel Run was. I didn't know what a parsec was. I just knew, yo, this must mean something
Yeah.
important. And I never wanted to know beyond that.
Yeah.
Then they make that Han
Han
Solo
Solo. Yeah. And then
movie.
that's when they bring it in what it was. Yeah.
And I was like, and I sat in that theater and I was like, yo, you just ruined everything. Because what was in my imagination was so much better than what they did in that
Yeah.
movie. And so the 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 advice I give a lot of young people, a lot of creatives getting started is that if you're making comics, you're going to collaborate. As myself as a writer, I collaborate with my artist, I collaborate with the whole art team, the colorist, there's the editor, there's the letterer. I said, but the final person that I always collaborate with, most of those collaborators I never meet because they're the people who read the comic. And then once somebody reads the comic, they're participating in it coming to life, and how they bring it to life is totally up to them, how they interpret it. And unless they get something that's way off base, unless they go, oh, I loved your comic and I appreciate the fact that what you're saying is cannibalism is a good thing and we all should be cannibals, then I'm going to be like, oh, no, that's not what I'm saying. But if somebody says to me, oh, I just love how your comic is all about the dysfunctional relationship between fathers and sons, that might not have been what I put in there intentionally, but this is what you saw. And I'm never going to say to you, no, you're wrong, Don. It's not about the dysfunctional relationship between father and son. I'll be like, well, thank you. And then someone asked me in an interview and I'll go, well, it's really about the dysfunctional relationship between fathers and
But
sons.
I think that's the beauty of writing and reading the written word, because you put your own visuals to the words before you see it in the movies. Like you said, any book that you read that hasn't even been made into a movie, you're making a movie in your head as you're reading the book of what it looks like, what the characters look like, and everything else. And so it is sometimes a disappointment when you do watch a movie and you've already visualized in your head before it even comes out.
But it's also, I mean, I hold to the fact that a comic graphic novel is more like a prose novel than it is a film. Even though it's got pictures and visuals in it, there's so many opportunities for the reader to use their imagination and their spatial perception, how they interpret space and time, all this sort of stuff that, we get way into the weeds, but there ain't enough time and I got stuff I got to do this afternoon. You got stuff you got to do. But it really is like it's part art, it's part science, and it's part magic, right? That's what creating comics is. It's a three-part equation, art, science, magic.
And I think it's, and this is just my opinion, I think it's really magic. Like I said, I think it's magical when you let the person build their own world around like I said, build their own visuals and their own world around your words. You may have an intention, like you said, you may not have written that to be a father, a dysfunctional thing, but that was what they pulled from the words that you wrote. Now, depending on whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think there's something to be said for leaving the imagination up to the viewer or reader. And I think good horror doesn't 100%. Show the monster. They let, good, horror or sci-fi doesn't show the monster. They let the viewers bring their own imagination to the monster. They may show a little glimpse of it or this and that, but I think that was the trick. And Steven Spielberg will even say that. I mean, it might have been mainly because the shark wasn't working, but
no, that's totally, I agree.
It 100%. Works for that because the viewer, that's why I don't like beaches and like going into deep water, because of the thought of what, and I didn't even have to see the shark. So I think there's something to be said for because a person's imagination is going to be so much more than maybe the words that are in the on the paper type of thing. So it's something to be said for those writers, those directors, those creators that are able to get their vision across, but still leave it up to whoever's consuming their art to pull something, from it, their own thing, their own visual, their own idea from it, type of thing. Everybody just jumping in. We've been having an amazing conversation with my man David Walker, comic book writer, Solid Comics, creator of Blackenstein. What do you see? Where do you see, and where are you wanting to take Blackenstein? And how far? I mean, obviously, your imagination is your imagination. You can just go. But where is your intention and path for Blackenstein?
I just want to make some really entertaining stories, and then I want to start bringing in the other monsters, right? So I've got a vampire, I've got the equivalent to a werewolf, I've got all these, my version of the universal monsters, but all under this sort of guise of an examination of who are the real monsters. Um, so with Blackenstein, I figure, right now I have probably another 3 to 5 issues worth of material, either completely written out or mapped out. And, you know, but like I'm not going to be happy until I have, like my, like I got this guy right here. I don't know if you can see him, but
Oh wow, yeah,
like it's my
that's
there's a
cool.
bust. Like I film, TV, no, but action figures, yeah.
Mm,
I want to see people wearing Blackenstein t-shirts, and I want to see stickers, and because ultimately, if you see the character, if it resonates with you, then hopefully the message of what I'm trying to say is resonating with you. And I feel like that that the monster represents something that's really near and dear to my heart, something that's important for me to say.
yeah.
And with every project that I have, that there's quite a few projects I'm working on right now where it's like, yeah, I'm not sure exactly how long any of it's going to be. It's just, for one thing, it's like, well, how much can I afford to spend
Mm,
to do this,
yeah.
right? Because I'm paying for, the artists who work for me. I don't, I can't pay them what Marvel pays them, but I pay everybody.
Yeah.
And, I'm definitely spending more money than I'm making.
Yeah. It's an
But
investment. Trust me, I see
yeah,
I see like I said, I've had a lot of artists, comic book artists, writers on, that are producing their own comics and stuff. And I see them doing the like you said, the Comic Cons, going around the conventions. It's a lot of work, really promoting,
yeah,
getting your IP, your story out there, and really getting it in the hands of people. Like you said, it's expensive because you're paying.
yeah,
It's if you're not doing a fun, Kickstarter, it's coming out of your own pocket to pay
yeah,
the artist, the printer, the colorist, all those people that got to be paid to make hard copy books. And then that depends on what your run is, how many,
yeah.
how many runs are you going to make, type of thing. So while I tell people the upside can be good, but it's a lot of work if you're going to do it yourself. And you got to be, like you said, willing to put in the work, and you got to be willing to go that kind of indie route that's going to
Yeah.
require
Oh,
you,
definitely.
to
Yeah.
back it. Um,
So,
we've been having an amazing conversation, almost an hour and a half. And I'm so thankful we've gotten
yeah.
through relatively well. But I want to ask you
Yeah.
this before we kind of bring the train into the station, because this is a big thing, and I'm pretty sure you probably come across artists, maybe even writers. Obviously AI is a big thing, and where you kind of lie on AI comic books, AI writing, AI illustrating other books, where do you kind of fall on it? In the sense, because obviously for that creator that isn't a writer, isn't an artist, it gives them a way to do it without necessarily having to hire somebody. Not necessarily it's going to come out good, but I've had
No,
people fall on either
I don't, so
side.
I don't, I'm totally opposed to it. If you need to use AI to write a story, you shouldn't be writing a story. If you need AI to draw your comic, you shouldn't be having a comic drawn, right? Like that's it. It's as plain and simple as that. And um just because it's there doesn't mean you should use it.
Yeah.
A loaded gun doesn't mean you pick it up and use it, right? It's the what do they say? You know, if you point that gun at somebody, you better be prepared to fire it, right? And so I feel like with AI, it's I see a lot of people who you know, don't have, like, I'll be 100% honest, they don't have any skills and they don't have any talent. And it's like, for them to, like, you know, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but to be able to go into competition with somebody who spent years developing their craft, and then what you're doing is essentially stealing from them, right? Now it's, look, I learned how to make comics. I had a collection of Hagar the Horrible.
Oh yeah,
a paperback book.
Yeah.
And I had a couple Peanuts collections. And I would sit there and I had the books open off to my left, and I had a paper, pen, and I would draw what I saw and I would write it out. And I was copying those things, right? Just like a lot of musicians, they learn how to play music by playing a song that they really like, by listening to an album over and over again. And there's one thing to learn by copying something, but you're still spending days and weeks and months and years, as opposed to minutes, just going, okay, do this for me. I want to write a story that's a lot like, you know, Aliens, except instead of aliens, I want them to be dolphin people, right? And then boom, suddenly you got it. That's just like, there's no heart and soul there. And more importantly, like, as a creative, you're not learning. Being a creative, I don't care what medium you're using, is a lot of it is about learning how to bring something to life, right?
Yeah.
And how to nurture it and how to let it grow and how to let it evolve and become its own thing. And if you don't go through that process of making the mistakes and the hard-won victories and the agonizing defeats,
Yeah.
I just don't believe you're going to be good at it, you know? And so I see people show me some of their AI stuff, and I'm like, yeah, but what can you do?
I can
right?
prompt.
You know, what can you know?
That's
what
they
can you
say.
do?
I can write the prompt.
Yeah, well, okay, have fun. There you go. You know.
Oh man, yeah, it's going to be interesting moving forward. And, you know, my thought is, again, it's a tool.
Yeah.
You know, and you use it as such, and like any tool, there's always going to be people that use a tool the wrong way, or try and shortcut things. So, you know, there are going to be people out there that use it the wrong way, or use it solely as a way of bypassing the skill, like you said, of learning the craft and really getting better at the craft of what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's going to be interesting the next 2, 3, 5 years going down the line, because again, we're in this, I like to call, AI bubble, and it's going to burst pretty soon.
Oh yeah, it's going to burst.
Type of thing.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, we've been having a fun, man, we're almost, like I said, almost an hour and 45 minutes. But I do want to be respectful, because I know you have an appointment immediately after this. And I can't thank you enough, David, again, for, you know, rescheduling and coming back on. And definitely am looking forward to having you back on to talk more deeply about, you know, Blackenstein and some of your other projects. You know, like I tell all my guests and friends, this is a platform to really highlight the things that you're working on. You know, I've got my small little corner, and I don't mind handing off the megaphone and really highlighting a lot of great talent. Like I said, that's why I had Newton on. He's an amazing writer. Crescent City's amazing book. There's so many amazing creators out there working on their own stories and own IP, own, their own creations. I just feel honored to be able to give you a platform to come on and really talk about the things that you're passionate about. Because I'm passionate about cartoons, comics, and just the industry as a whole. So cannot thank you enough, brother, for coming on and being a part of this show.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure, and And now I'm gonna bounce and do my thing, do the all the other stuff that needs to get done.
Everybody, this has been a great one. Let's thank again my guest and friend, Mr. David Walker, for coming on and sharing. Can't thank you enough. I normally ask my guests to hang out, but I know you got to cut out. So I will touch base with you Monday once I get everything on the show list. But thanks again, David, for coming on and being a part of the family, brother.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, brother. Man, this has been a great show. I can't thank again, like I said, David enough for coming back on and returning on, because the first one was a little fiasco there, and I can see that I got some things to work on for sure. But I can't thank you enough, the viewers, for hanging and supporting all the little ups and downs that the show has gone through over the 6 years. 6 years. Man, 6 years of doing this, of doing the show. And you've hung with me the whole time. That's why I love you guys for sure. Again, make sure that, you join us next week, because next week's going to be just as good. It's going to be, a great show. Always trying to make it better. I'm super looking forward to Miss Vanessa and sending creative producer. She's worked on some great animated projects out of South Africa. So she worked with Triggerfish. So definitely looking forward to having her on and sitting and diving into some more animation talk. Man, oh man, this has been a great episode, a great Saturday. Thank you, Mr. Paul Brown, for tuning in and being a part of the show. Please don't make this your last time stopping by, because, like I said, I try to make sure that I bring the best possible guests that I can to come on and then just have a good time. And we do. So I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show. Donnell, appreciate you tuning in. And it's pretty wild that you know him and have met David. So that's kind of cool. So hit me up, man. We need to talk. All right. This is going to be a good one. Next week is going to be a good one. Make sure you have a great rest of your Saturday and an even better week. I will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, for sure. So cheers, everybody.